Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining or listening to the recording if this is after the session. Today, we're going to talk about XBOW Pentesting On Demand. Our hope for this conversation is that we'll convey our passion for advancing cybersecurity and that you'll walk away with an understanding of how XBOW Pentesting On Demand can meet your immediate security needs, just as Bloompath has done. With that, let's go ahead and get started. My name's Aqeel Siddiqui. I'm joined today by my incredible colleague, Sarah Hyatt. Sarah, would you mind taking a moment to say hello and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Aqeel, and hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I work as an application security consultant at XBOW, as well as being the co-founder of TechBrains, which is a small consultancy that does pen testing. And I'm a board member of Women for Cyber Denmark, where I try to help shape the next generation of security professionals. I am very excited to show you all what we've been working on lately. But first, I think Aqeel should add a few more words to his impressive journey on getting where we are today.
Oh, well, thank you, Sarah. Sure, happy to do so. I lead product here at Expo. I'm proud to be one of the company's founding team members. And before Expo, I was also a founding team member of GitHub Next, where I had the exciting opportunity to launch GitHub Copilot, first with OpenAI and later with Azure. Earlier in my career, I worked at Veracode, where I led professional services operations for an application security company. And one of my team's responsibilities, surprise, surprise, was around managing pen testing engagements. So that's a little bit about us. Now, here's a quick look at what we're going to cover today. We'll take a step back and look at why the results that Bloompath had achieved, which was starting a pen test and submitting their compliance report in 5 days, has been so hard to replicate up until this point. Then we'll introduce XBOW, how the platform automates the entire pen testing lifecycle and brings speed, consistency, and evidence-based validation together in one system. Sarah will finish us off with a live demo of XBOW On Demand, so you can see exactly how those results are generated and how easy it is to start a pen test in minutes. And we'll end, of course, with a Q&A. So please jump in the panel and ask any questions, whether it's related to the offering of XBOW Pentesting On Demand itself or the shift towards autonomous security that we're going to talk about. We'll be happy to answer them. There'll also be a few interactive polls along the way, so thank you in advance for your contributions. With that being said, great segue back to you, Sarah, to kick us off.
Thank you, Aqeel. And yeah, I think that we should just start with the first poll. So what is your team most likely to prioritize first when it comes to pen testing? You can select one of these options that you'll see. And just know that there is no wrong answer here because, for most teams, we know that the challenge is that you actually have to choose between one of them or more if you're lucky. But we'll come back to these results later. Next, I want to share with you some insights and also some acknowledgements because, I've been working with startups and smaller to mid-sized companies, and I know firsthand the fear that a lot are dealing with because, there's a constant pressure to stay secure in this world where things keep moving so fast. And at the same time, you want to keep your business afloat. And there's usually not enough resources for the work that needs doing already. If you, on top of that, are not exactly a security person yourself, it can be overwhelming to also have to understand and deal with all the security measures you have to take in. And it's a fact that 78% of SMBs, they're worried that a serious cyber attack could shut down their business, and half report the difficulties of filling up open security roles, which of course leaves a lot caught between this high risk and limited resources trouble. So, but that's not all. I think Aqeel also has a few more words to add on this matter.
Yeah, definitely. I do, Sarah. First, I'd like to acknowledge kind of the results from the poll, which is that we obviously saw It was a little bit of an unfair question to ask because we were forcing people to choose three very important dimensions. But the reality is that you are often forced to choose between these things today. And so let me take you back for a minute or two, back to 2015, share some experiences that I have and relate that back to the triangle that you're seeing on the screen. So at the time, I was running manual pen testing operations, uh, servicing hundreds of tests a year. So I'd ask you to picture this. Imagine an endless back and forth between tester and customer schedules, Gantt charts that were color coded like a rainbow that stretched a mile wide, credentials that would fail in the middle of the night before a test, rush fees that were popping up, and calls, just like so many calls, scoping calls, kickoff calls, readout calls, consultation calls. Everything was incredibly, incredibly manual. Literally every engagement felt like scheduling gymnastics, and I would be lying if I was saying I didn't want to pull some of my hair out. And that's honestly one of the reasons why I joined Expo. It's because that world, all that complexity and all that friction, when I kind of have looked at kind of where the industry has gone, has barely changed when it comes to pen testing. And so if you plot that world on the triangle of speed, cost, and quality, we're often stuck today way out in the slow and expensive corner. A typical pen test can take 4 to 6 weeks just to get started. That's 4 to 6 weeks before you can even get your first result. So that's the speed problem right there. And then there's the cost side. So pen testing has always been treated as the gold standard for enterprise security programs. But when I reflect back and think on all of the engagements that I managed, every single one of them was a big company, a big recognizable company that you or I would know. So not one for a small team. So that suggests that it was an enterprise only luxury and that those enterprises were willing to pay both the speed tax of 4 to 6 weeks that I talked about, or the cost tax, because today a pen test on a web application can cost anywhere between ten or $35,000. And so the larger companies are the ones who are willing to suffer the speed or the cost tax in order to do those. But unfortunately, smaller teams can't do that. They need to move faster and they need something that's cheaper. So when they go in those directions, that's where they turn towards things like automated scans, which have connotations of being noisy, being shallow, being full of false positives. And that's where they fall off the quality triangle completely. And that's really the problem that every team's been forced to pick and that we force you to pick in the poll today. And that's the gap that we've set out to close here at Expo. So what I just described to you is the traditional world of pen testing, full of all these human coordination, manual processes, and slow cycles. But I also think it's really, really important to layer in the new AI era. So attackers aren't working at human speed anymore. They're automating the entire attack chain. Reconnaissance, exploit generation, even social engineering. All of those things are happening in minutes instead of days or weeks. But defenders, they're still working and stuck on human time. So we're just still going through all those laborious processes that I talked about, while attackers are running at 24/7 machine speed. And that's the real danger here, that the speed gap is growing. By the time that you've received a report that has a vulnerability, it might have already been found and exploited by an AI assisted attacker. If attackers are operating at machine speed, that means that defenders cannot afford to stay on calendar time. And so we need to find solutions that run continuously, that scale automatically, and that close the time gap that I talked about. And that's exactly where self-serve pen testing comes in. It's automation without sacrificing quality. So now that we've shared some of our experiences and observations, and before we switch gears and talking about the Expo pen testing on demand solution and demo, would love for folks to please take a moment to answer this quick poll, which is, what is the main reason your team is planning to run its next test? Thank you all for those who've submitted or are continuing to submit responses. Again, it's great to see such a diversity and a mix in the responses. We hear this from all of the customers that we work with. And I'd love to take a minute to just talk about how Expo can help here. So imagine that you've either just read about a new breach that's tied to your technology or that your team depends on, or maybe you're staring down a compliance deadline and it can't afford to wait. That's an opportune moment to ask yourself, could Expo help? And so the best place to start with that is with Expo Pentest On Demand. It's built for teams that need reliable, high quality pen testing fast, where you can launch a pen test in minutes and where you can get expert validated findings with proof of concepts um, right at your fingertips. So Sarah will get into this a little bit more in her demo, but each engagement will include a follow-up retest to confirm fixes, and all of your client data is securely deleted once the process wraps up. So it's a very simple and efficient way to understand exactly where you stand and to get started on your journey with Expo. Now, just to be clear, Expo is a full platform, and Pentest On Demand is one part of it. So we're not showing the entire platform today, not diving deep into its technology, since that's not the focus of this session. But I do want to give you all a quick short version of kind of what that next step looks like once you're ready to move beyond a one-time pen testing assessment. So Expo is the same platform that can scale with you. It can support continuous testing coverage. You can restart assessments at any time. You can add multiple applications. You'll find the curiosity of inspecting exactly what each Expo agent, which Sarah will talk about, is doing and follow its reasoning from start to finish. And most importantly, the full platform system remembers the context from previous runs so that every test gets faster and sharper over time. So with that context in mind, I'd love for us to take a little bit of a closer look as to how Expo works, and then jump specifically into the first step that I've talked about, which is the Pen Test On Demand demo. So with that, Sarah, I'd love to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Aqeel. And yeah, so, from a top level, Expo works with these 4 parts that I'm going to describe. The first part is our pre-flight, which is a part of the configuration. This is where Expo confirms reachability, authentication, and it will map out parts of your application. The second part is our coordinator agent, who's in charge of managing and coordinating solvers, which you see in part 3. These are our agentic pen testers. And these agentic pen testers, they run in parallel to test your application. The last part is number 4, which is our validators. And they check the results from the agentic pen testers and validate the findings that they come up with. So with these things in mind, I will show you how to get started and the end result. There we go. So the first thing I want you to do is go to expo@pentest.com. And in there, you will find a form in the bottom. I will recommend that you fill it out. Let me just quickly do this. Let's see. So of course you will need the regular information, but most importantly, you will also need to add the target URL. Just add that. So this target URL it's important that it's the one that you actually want to test, because once you have added this, you cannot change that. And it's also important that it's publicly accessible, because otherwise Expo will not have access to it. And if it's not something that's public, I recommend that you whitelist Expo's IPs. You do this by scrolling down, and then you will see the IPs that you need to whitelist so that Expo has access. Add an application name and select when you want it completed. We like to know if it's a compliance requirement or not. And then importantly, you need to check off that you've actually read the terms and conditions and that you have the full legal right to actually complete this pen test. Once you have filled that out, submit the request, and then we will reach out to you shortly after that. Once you have received once we have reached out to you and we have checked that your site is actually reachable and confirmed that it's valid, you will receive a welcome email with the login. And when you log in, you'll reach this site, which is our UI, the first page you'll see. As you can see here in the beginning, we have our target URL. This is the one that you typed in the form before. Then we have different authentication methods. So you can either choose to run an unauthenticated test, although if you have authentication, I recommend that you use it. You can authenticate either by username password, by email MFA, or by a one-time password. Note that XBOW runs authentication using a headless browser, a tool that we have made. I also recommend, if you have some sort of source code or documentation, you can upload it here. The reason it's good to upload this is because any extra information that you can give XBOW will make it run faster and more smooth, and you will get more value for credits. In this case, it can be anything like a Swagger file or, a requirements file. It can even be architecture diagrams or design notes. The things I wouldn't recommend uploading are things like Git directories or, output, build outputs, things that don't really assess, help in the assessment. Then we have this option of custom headers, which is really smart if you want to either whitelist using custom headers, but it can also be a good way for you to follow along on what XBOW is actually doing. You might have a SOC team or you might just be curious, but by adding the custom header, XBOW will include this custom header in each of the requests it makes, so that way you will be able to follow along on all of them. And of course, you have to confirm that you have whitelisted or disabled WAF, and that CAPTCHA is not blocking the assessment. Once that is done, we will delete this. We can start the checks. And as you can see, it will run a gentle crawl on your site. Imagine, skip fast forward, that it has finished the crawl on your site. Then you will reach this configuration check page. You can see that it has confirmed that the target is reachable. We didn't provide any credentials in this case. And in this case, since it's a micro benchmark, it's just a small application, it just found one domain as the scope. If you if you were testing a much bigger application, you might have a lot more domains that show up in this crawl. And some of them might not even be from your own domains. There might be things you use for authentication or like for fonts. Those that are not linked to your application will naturally be blocked, but you might also have some domains that you own and that are within your application that you might only want XBOW to visit and not attack. So you have that option to set those settings there. And if you want to be even more specific, you can block specific URLs that you don't want XBOW to take a look at. And these are some of the security mechanisms that we set up. On top of that, we have rate limit and allow window. So this means that with rate limit, you can adjust how many requests per second you want XBOW to run the assessment with. So of course, the lower the request, the slower the test. But at the same time, you also don't want to add so many requests per second that you will overwhelm your site and shut it down. So it's important that you understand how the pressure your site can handle. With the allowed window, you might just want XBOW to run, any time of day at any time zone, but you might also want it to run only during, for instance, business hours at this time zone that you are in. You have that option here. Once you have set these settings up, you just request a quote, and then you'll be contacted soon with the quote to sign. And once that's done, you'll be ready to start the assessment, which is the next fast forward I'm going to show you now. As you can see, we have an assessment running now. We have a progress bar running here. And if it had found some findings yet, you would see it here, but you'll see that on the next page. Once this is done and the assessment is finished, fast forward, you will see the page like this. You will see that we found a finding. Again, we're working on a micro benchmark, so there's not a lot on this page. It's for the demo, but you're also able to download the report. And I just want to show you, if we actually click on this finding that it's found, you will get to a page like this. Here, you can see the score of the finding it found. You can see there's a summary, how XBOW did. And, XBOW is really good at first. It will explain, step by step, the things that the steps that it took. But then it will always include this script you can just copy paste. And of course, update with the authentication token that you need if you need that for the exploit. It will talk about the impact, and it will also give you mitigation on what to do. But one of the nice features too is that you actually can follow along on the trace. So the trace is like it's all the steps that XBOW took from start to bottom. So not only the actual exploit steps, but also like, what did it think? Where did it start? You can follow along. It's like reading, a human pen tester walking through its thought process. And it's very educational and interesting. So I highly recommend taking a look at that. When you click the download report button, you'll reach a report like this. And it's a traditional pen test report in the sense that it has an introduction, an executive summary. We will also have scope, the objectives. Here you can see which vulnerability classes XBOW actually covers. We'll have a version history, methodology, the approach that XBOW uses to cover findings, and a pen test overview which goes a bit more in detail for your specific application on how it's covered it. Then we have the findings, and they're very similar to what you saw before in the specific finding. We have a summary, steps to reproduce, the script you could use, impact, and of course, recommendations on how you can mitigate this finding. One of the extra things you can choose to do is that, let's say that you've received a report, you've read it through, you found the findings, and you fixed them. Then you can choose to do a retest. In this case, there's only just one finding here, but you can click off all the findings that you have fixed that you want retested. And after you initialize the retest and it has run, you will receive a new report. And this time, this report will have the thing that will have changed is, for instance, the version history. This time, you will actually see that it doesn't say 2 open findings. It now says 2 fixed findings. And when we go to the actual findings, you will also see that the status has now changed from open to fixed. So this can be very useful for compliance reasons if you need to show that you may have had some vulnerabilities, but you have in fact fixed them now. And yes, that was the demo of our XBOW Pentest On-Demand. I'll give the word back to you, Aqeel.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. I've been typing away as fast as I can to many of the questions in the Q&A, which we'll get back to shortly. But before that, again, Sarah, thank you for doing the live demo. I know that that's not always easy, so appreciate that you were willing to do that. We have one poll, final poll for attendees, which is, after watching that demo and hearing today's session, would you consider exploring a new way to meet your security needs? Awesome. Thank you. I see many responses ticking in. Okay, I think we can go forward to the next slide. So before we open it up for questions, I just wanted to share this slide quickly. What you're seeing here is a snapshot of where Expo stands today. The result of years of research and real-world testing. We're very proud that Expo has reached the top of HackerOne's global leaderboard and has discovered vulnerabilities in some of the world's most security-conscious organizations. One of the questions that I answered in the Q&A was around, can Expo find zero-day vulnerabilities? And yes, it has done and can continue to do so. We have found zero-day vulnerabilities in some of our existing customers. Um, but more than anything, beyond these leaderboards and kind of these accolades, I think the thing that I most want to share is that I take this as proof that and validation that autonomous offensive security and autonomous pen testing is here and that it works. And so our focus now is on helping more teams close the gap between attackers and defenders. And we hope that you consider doing that with Expo Pen Testing on Demand. So with that, we'd love to open it up for Q&A. And so Sarah and I will take a moment to look through the questions that have come in the panel. I see a few questions around pricing, so I'll just kind of address that to start, which is the Expo Pentest On Demand pricing is on the website of expo.com/pentesting, and the offering starts at $6,000 a pen test.
I've also seen a question on whether Expo hours are dependent on the rate limit. The question is, if it's a slow rate limit, does it mean that it uses more credits? And no, it's not how it works. You will use the same amount of credits whether it runs slow or fast. It's basically how it's divided into how fast or how many parallel processes are run at the same time. So that's how it works. It does not depend on that.
I see a question around training AI using previous pen test data. Do you use customer data to train your ML or AI models? And the answer there is no, absolutely not. We do not do that. I see a question around how does Expo map the application terrain in a black box scenario? How do you ensure proper coverage? That's getting a little bit more into the technical details of how Expo works, but during the pre-flight that Sarah shows you, we'll crawl the application and identify a sitemap. But when the assessment is actually running itself, Expo runs discovery agents both in the beginning and throughout the assessment to continuously make sure that we're providing comprehensive coverage and identifying all the appropriate endpoints and mapping attack classes accordingly. I see a question around how do you handle applications with multiple user roles? So the Expo Pen Test On Demand offering is limited to single user roles. If that's something that you are interested in, then I would recommend having a conversation with a member of our sales team to talk about the broader platform offering.
I can see that someone's also asking if we provide remediation. I assume when they mean when they also add source code access. And absolutely, the remediation part applies to all. And it will also find very specific vulnerabilities that it finds through the source code that you provide. So you will get very specific recommendations based on that. And also someone is asking if Expo works with sites with 2FA. And as you saw in the demo, there are two different 2FA options that we can test or assess with. So there are some that are covered.
So there was a question around, can Expo provide a list of the tests performed and indicate the result of each test showing whether an issue was identified, yes or no? The vulnerabilities that Expo supports are public knowledge, and we can share that information. For the Expo Pentest On Demand offering, unlike the full platform offering for Expo, provides a coverage map that allows you to see all of the tests that Expo has performed against all of the endpoints. And so you'll have a visual of that there. For Expo Pentest On Demand, the deliverable is the report that Sarah showed you.
There's also a question on whether XBOW can chain multiple vulnerabilities. And you will see that it does that because some of the more advanced exploits it creates, or critical ones in most cases we will see, are actually several exploits that, go into a chain and cover that.
I see more of a commercial question around, does XBOW support MSP and white label? What would be the commercial? I would encourage you. I see somebody named Zach, ZACK at expo.com is on the line. I would encourage you to reach out to him to talk about that question. I see a question around, is an on-prem version of the solution on the product roadmap? And the answer to that question is yes, there is.
I also see several ask, how does it compare to DAS tools? And, it's not actually a DAS tool. It works very differently. It will work with these AI that work very creatively in actually creating these exploits that are very specific to your application, and not just check for, old libraries that have and these kind of things. So it compares in the sense that it is in fact an AI, like the traces I showed. You will see that the AI does work creatively into create exploits that are specific, as well as also finding the low-hanging fruits as outdated libraries and stuff like that you will find in traditional DAS tools.
Thanks, Sarah. I see a question of, where does my source code go if I upload it? How is it protected? And is it used for training the models? I already answered that last question. For XBOW's multi-tenant SaaS solution, each customer source code lives in its own S3 bucket. I also saw a question around, how do you guarantee safe exploitation for production systems without causing outages? And so there's a few things that we do at XBOW. So first, we prohibit dangerous commands by default, and we also have trained XBOW to ensure that it is simulating proof of concepts that are not harmful. And most importantly, we have a judge model that oversees every single command that XBOW tries to issue, and will intercept if it identifies that XBOW is potentially taking a behavior that would be considered unsafe. Just taking a moment to scroll through. There are a
Yes.
lot of questions.
So, and there's also a question whether humans validate the results before they're published. And as I also mentioned quickly of how XBOW works, we do have validators that go in and check, how whether it's the finding is correct or not. That being said, we're also open to get a pushback on a finding that we post or that you will see as a result, and follow up on that, because we take false positives very seriously and consider them bugs.
Thank you, Sarah. That is true. I see a question around, can you perform multiple retests of the same issue until it's fixed? That is something that customers can take advantage of as a part of the full platform. For the Pentest On-Demand offering, we allow customers to perform a single retest. Um, See a few questions on commercials and MSSPs and partnerships. Again, would recommend that you reach out to info@expo.com or sales@expo.com, and folks would be better suited to answer those questions than Sarah or I. I see a question around, how does XBOW handle less widespread technologies and proprietary frameworks? Are there differences in coverage and/or quality with respect to widespread frameworks? That's one of the beauties of using LLMs. Like XBOW is really great at recognizing obscure frameworks. There are a few blog posts, I think, that have demonstrated that, including one around how we achieve an exploit with this obscure Hokon language. So that would be one that I would encourage folks to read. Have very high confidence in XBOW's performance with this regard. I see a question around, can Expo also suggest code fixes for the found issues themselves? So that's the natural evolution for where the product is going. So it cannot do that right now, but we're very keen to get there and have spent early and are already in R&D cycles to get us on that journey. I see a question around which AI models do you rely on? I think you might have seen a blog post from Albert Ziegler around alloy models and the use of foundational models. Would encourage folks to make sure that they're reading Expo's blog, which is a great call out because we're always sharing some of the great information from some of our most technical team members there. I see a question on, is it possible to refine pen test processes and provide free-form instructions, what to focus on and what to ignore? It's a fantastic question. It's a core pillar of our product roadmap, actually, about operator first and infusing human intuition into Expo pen tests. That is something that is available for full platform customers to be able to infuse their human intuition before a test kicks off. So whether that's on focusing on particular areas of the application, whether that's on sharing previous payloads that might have been successful, or that you might want Expo to consider, there is absolutely an opportunity to do that with Expo. Yes.
And I can see someone also asking about mobile applications and whether Expo can, find vulnerabilities there. And that is not something we do at the moment, but it will come also. It's also on the roadmap.
See a question around, can Expo be used to test internal web applications via VPN? For the pen testing on demand offering, the answer is no. For the full platform offering, the answer is yes. For any, sorry,
Sorry.
Sarah.
Yeah,
So
sure.
as a reminder, as Sarah mentioned, for the applications would have to be publicly accessible or whitelisted IP addresses for pen testing on demand.
And for all of you, those of you who are asking about the different specific vulnerability classes you want to know, just know that it's in the report as well as on the side you can see which specific vulnerability classes it covers right now, and just know that you can follow along and see how it's evolving into covering more and more along the way. So those are things that are also on the way.
I'll be a bit cheeky. I like this question. If you had to compare yourselves with Nessus or Acunetics, where would you put Expo? In a different league.
Absolutely. And yes, this is a
Uh,
recording also, so you'll be able to see it afterwards.
There's been a question or two around, do you have a benchmark of Expo against open source AI pen testers, such as X, Y, and Z? We have, when Expo launched, we demonstrated our capabilities on open source benchmarks. We set the standards for that, which are what many of these pen testers are now evaluating their competencies against. Expo's moved beyond that, and as I would encourage folks to ask where those open source AI pen testers are, if you've seen any of them on the HackerOne leaderboards at the same ranking as Expo.
And someone also asked whether Expo would generate like a Python script for each of the findings. And yes, if it applies that you can add a Python script, it will add a Python script that you can simply copy paste and run the exploit. It's only cases where it's like, for instance, if we've mentioned before, finding an outdated library, it doesn't really make sense necessarily to add a Python script there, but for creative exploits, it does. It will also sometimes add bash scripts, if that makes more sense in those cases. But yeah, you will see definitely see a variety of ways it does it.
There was a question around what will Expo do in the presence of kind of WAFs and firewalls. And so the assessment will pause. We don't want to waste valuable your valuable time and money being spent on bypassing WAFs. Much like a human pen tester would ask you to disable a WAF, Expo will ask you to do that as well.
Yeah, and for those who are concerned about some of the data, the data is segregated. So we apply, of course, all the security mechanisms that we also recommend on how we set up our own system. And a question whether we can, if XBOW pauses, if something breaks. Yes, absolutely. That's actually a very important point and good question. If something happens, or let's say that you by accident set the request per second too high, then XBOW will actually automatically pause. It will not just continue rambling on your site. It will try a few times on something specific, and if it sees that there is a problem that it cannot continue, it will pause, and then we will look into it and investigate and find a way to move forward.
There's a question on can we pause XBOW if it breaks something on production? Yes, absolutely. You have the ability to pause and resume a test with XBOW at any point in time. Actually, XBOW will probably auto pause in that instance because it will identify that there is a network error, and it will pause itself. Cool.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Sarah, I think we have covered a good amount of questions, and I know that we wanted to be respectful of people's time and take the webinar to 45 minutes, which I believe that we are approaching. So with that, I think, Sarah, unless there are any other questions that you'd like to answer.
No, thanks, Aqeel. I think we covered most.
All right. Well, with that being said, I'd love to just again thank you everyone for being here, for submitting the questions, for your intrigue and for your interest. For those of you watching the recording after the fact, thank you again very, very much. We'll hope that you consider XBOW.com pentesting, XBOW.com/pentesting for your next pen testing needs. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.